In the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the gracious and the most merciful, the first of all, thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has given us some mercies and blessing. So we can meet in the forum without any mistakes and obstacles. Secondly, may salawat and salam given to our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who has brought us from the darkness to the lightness, as name is Islam. I'm Tongat, Dean in Faculty of Law, University of Muhammadiyah Malang. Malang is Java, Indonesia. It's a humbling thing to be asked as person who deliver the welcoming remarks here in the forum that held by Faculty of Law, University of Muhammadiyah Malang, Indonesia, and University of Debrecen, Hungary, with so many impactful and talented attendees. As recorded per 24 February 2023, Indonesia has 39 BUMN that decrease annually due to bankruptcy, such as Merpati Airlines, Lectures, Paper and Pulp Factory, and so on. It's a big dilemma why Indonesia, with most natural resources, cannot manage properly. So on the forum today will help us what Indonesia and Hungary perspective to get brightness solution for BUMN issues in Indonesia. In all this, our goal is to continue to make an international collaboration through several academic activities. We thank to our speaker and all below participants. Please enjoy this forum. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Mas Arya belum di-unmute.
Thank you very much for your insightful remarks, Dr. Tongat. And today we have wonderful moderator. His name is Asrul Ibrahim, one of prominent scholar in Jakarta, Indonesia. He is a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Law at Debrecen University, Hungary, and surely he would like to accompany us as to bridge the views of the discussion today. Now, time is yours, Mr. Asrul.
Thank you, Mr. Arya. Dear Pak Tongat, and also dear Professor Ildiko, and dear college and the audience from Indonesia and from Hungary. We welcome you to this online event, to the public lecture. In this lecture, Professor Ildiko Bartha will deliver to you it's the general theme. It's about state-owned enterprises in EU perspective. Yesterday, I have a small talk with Professor Ildiko that she said Indonesia has a unique mode how to manage the state-owned enterprises, because mostly there is no Ministry of State-owned enterprises in every countries in the world, but Indonesia own it, and also it became a main shareholder to the state-owned enterprises. Before Professor Ildiko Bartha deliver the lecture, I will read some of information about Professor Ildiko. Professor Ildiko is Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law, University of Debrecen, Hungary. She holds a PhD degree in law from Miskolc University, and currently Professor Ildiko Bartha is head of Department of International and European Law in the University of Debrecen. And from now on, please, Professor Ildiko, give us the lecture from the EU perspective of the state-owned enterprises. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Welcome to all of you, professors, students, participants. So I'm very pleased to be here to participate in this lecture series and share my thoughts about state-owned enterprises in the European Union. So I, as Asrul also mentioned, I would like to highlight some issue about regulation, approaching, and questioning the status of state-owned enterprises in the European Union. I also prepared some slides for that. After presenting my thoughts, I'm very happy if you raise me a question and if I can share with you these doubts and related questions regarding the state-owned enterprises, not only in the European Union, but also all over the world. As Asrul also mentioned, we had this discussion yesterday, and we established that the Indonesian system is unique in regarding the organization of coordinating and ownershiping state-owned enterprises. You will see that in the European Union itself, there are diverse solutions for regulating and organizing state-owned enterprises. So let me share my slides. And so you can still see the moving of the slides, right?
Yes, we can see the move.
Okay. I'm asking it because in previous lectures I had some problem with that, and I would like to ask you that if you can see any technical problem, please let me know, and I will I try to solve it. So the title of my presentation is what I would like to share with you is the state-owned companies in times of crisis. To be honest, the right expression is rather state-owned enterprises, but literature often used companies instead. It also refers to the fact that there are several solutions of how to own enterprises, companies by the state. It is also important to emphasize that in that lecture there will be highlighted those forms of state-owned enterprises which according to their charter and operational rule, they are operating as private enterprises, but somehow the European Union has a share, or the state has a share in this entity. And despite the fact that they are operating in form as private company, there might be privileges which can be derived from the ownership of the state. So I'm gonna talk about now. So first I would like to show you some data in order to place the significance of the state-owned enterprises in the world economy, and in particular in the European Union. And then I also would like to discuss the state-owned enterprises, which is itself a diverse concept in the European Union. Then I would like to highlight the main regulatory pillars of the European Union. You will see that it is rather a framework than specific standards for state-owned enterprises. And then I would like to discuss some issues about the crisis, the corona crisis impact on the role of state-owned enterprises in the European Union. So let's see, can you see the full screen? Okay, fine. So this chart shows the main enterprises according to total assets and revenue in the world. These data are from 2020. And you will see that other parts of the world, the state-owned enterprises role is very relevant, and they are very big giant actors of the international trade. But you can see also that there is, for example, the EDF company from France, among the largest companies. And you can see here that can you see the year number as well? Okay, so this table shows the rapidly growing number of state-owned enterprises. As you can see, in 2019, there are more than 100 state-owned enterprises in the world, among the largest 5,000 enterprises. And this number was in 2005 only 34. You can see that in the Asian countries, this process was much more rapid developing process than in the European Union. But in the European Union, the number of such enterprises also shows a growing tendency. So it shows that it was discussing the issue of state-owned enterprises in the European Union and the world. You can see here also some data about the share of state-owned enterprises by sectors. We can see this is, I think, quite a general tendency, both in Europe and other parts of the world, that state-owned enterprises are mainly present in the utility sector, like energy supply, water supply, waste management, and so on. And in the transportation sectors, in particular in the local public transportation. But you can see that in other sectors, they are also present in a quite significant percentage. Like in the manufacturing sector, you can see, for example, the main German companies like the Volkswagen or French company Renault, and in the IT sector, they are also more and more significant percentage, which is they represent. And this figure also shows that they not are present only as regards their market share, but they are also very important as companies which has a large number of employees. So it also shows that this has some social function. And we can see now such new trend that I would like to highlight here. First, that beyond the traditional sectors that I mentioned before, there are quite recent sectors there these enterprises are increasingly present, like renewable energy investment, electromobility sector, and artificial intelligence sector. We can also see that, for example, the sustainable development, you can find this expression in many strategic plan of companies, of state-owned companies. And you can also see a trend that over the past 2 decades, the state-owned enterprises have been among the largest and fastest expanding multinational companies. So there is also a discussion about their role as multinational companies, and it lead many conflicts of jurisdictions between different legislative systems in the world. Let's see first that what we can understand under state-owned enterprises in the European Union. As I indicated before, there are diverse solutions, which means that currently there are no uniform company law in the European Union. There are certain direction to develop such a uniform company once in the European Union, but currently the situation is that the legal harmonization in that field is only partial. So we can see that there are certain segments where there is some minimum harmonization, but the large part of company law in the European Union is regulated by the individual states according to their unique legislative solution. It also means that there is only one uniform company form, sorry, there are only 2 which are regulated at the level of the European Union, but the most traditional company form, like limited liability company and publicly limited company and so on, these are also regulated state by state. So it means, it logically means that there is no uniform concept for state-owned enterprises. It means that in the European Union member states, there are no regulation for the minimum percentage of shares. So it means that company with only 1% share for the state in the company can also be defined as a state-owned company. And for example, I can show you the one of the Hungarian unique solution in the main petrol company in Hungary, the MOL company. You can see here the graphic which refers to that. And in that company, the Hungarian government has a so-called preferential share with a priority voting right. The value is minimal value, as you can see, €2.5. And this is the so-called B series share, which means that the percentage of the share is in the total asset of the company is very minimal, but this share ensures for the Hungarian government a preferential veto rights regarding the decisions of the company. So this is also a solution. To be honest, it is questionable whether it is in line with the European Union's requirement, but I will discuss it later. And this is also important to emphasize that the direct ownership is also not a requirement. So companies where, for example, as you can see, the state owns 100% a company, and this company has a subsidiary, for example. The subsidiary, so here the number, company number 2, can also be regarded as a state-owned company. And it has also further consequences, because sometimes you cannot see at first sight from this such a subsidiary that this is a state-owned company, and you must be careful sometimes with such subsidiary. Let's see who is the shareholder. We were also discussing or mentioned a few words with Asrul about this question, that who owns directly the shares. It is also a question. I would say, so there's no uniform model in the European Union either to this question. The main model is that the government itself owns the share, but there are other solutions, like it is owned by the line ministry, like Minister of Finance or Minister of Development, or specific agency, or it is also quite common solution that there is a big holding company which owns the share, but sometimes the holding only coordinates the function of the company. And it is also important to emphasize that local governments can, so when the local government is the owner and not the central government, this is also a state-owned company in the terminology of the European Union. So, or for example, in Germany, the state of the Federal Republic of Germany, the state or the Land in German expression, these are also shareholders of very important state-owned companies. Like the Volkswagen, in the Volkswagen there is also land share and not a federative share. And you can see also mixed solution. So for example, then, I don't know, there is 20% share owned by the government itself, plus 10% which is owned by the holding. It is also, there are also many examples for that. And let's see, so if we would like to stand certain models for exercising the ownership, maybe this is the better that I can show you. This is on OECD classification, and it makes distinction between 3 types of model: the centralized model, the coordinating agency model, and the so-called twin track model. Let's see this centralized model. So it means, to be honest, it must be emphasized that these models can sometimes also be mixed each other. So it is quite rarely can find some clear solution. Let's see. So the centralized model means that there is one institution, like government agency, ministry, and so on, which is responsible for the ownership function regarding all or at least the majority of shares. So for example, that company also belongs to the centralized model, where, for example, the 19% of share is so regarding the 19% of share, one centralized body exercises the ownership function, and in the remaining 10 there are other solutions. It is also a centralized model. So let's see, for example, Italy. There is a Ministry of Economic and Finance, and this is which exercises the ownership function. In Finland, there is an ownership steering department at the Prime Minister office. So here you can see only a division within a ministry. And Netherlands, this is closer to the Indonesian model, because here, even if not ministry as a whole, but division, there is a certain division within the ministry, the state-owned enterprises division, which is responsible for that function. And in Hungary, we can see a holding company, this Hungarian National Asset Management Company, which is responsible for that. And in the case of Hungary, this is also the situation that only, I don't know, around 95% of the companies are owned or governed directly by this holding, and there are exemptions which are governed by means of another solution. Coordinating agency model, it is so the main distinction from the previous one is that okay, there is one or more institution, but they are not exercising ownership rights, but they are rather coordinating bodies. So it means that they are coordinating bodies, and even the government and another body or bodies exercise the ownership rights. So it is mainly about coordinating the activities of the companies, like in Latvia, where there's a coordinating entity, but the shares themselves held by 11 line ministries and one state institution and one main state-owned enterprises is responsible for the performance of duties of shareholder. So it is quite a mixed question, but a good example for such coordinating model. And this twin track model is rather unique. It exists only in Belgium, where there is a federal holding and investment company and a ministry. And this holding company has both ownership and coordinating function. This is a so-called twin track model. And let's see now the relevant rules of the European Union. You can see, so first I would like to highlight the fundamentals, the very fundamentals of the EU internal market, how it does work, which is the expectation, and why it can be relevant for the state-owned companies as entities. As you can see, there are, I would say, definition for the internal market, a broad definition that this is an area without internal frontiers in which the free movement of goods, persons, services, and capital is ensured. And there is another, so these quotations are from the main treaties of the European Union, but I didn't want to refer to the specific article number or that. So here you can see the mission of the internal market. And you can see it is important to highlight in this mission that it is not based on the completely free market concept. It is highlighted that it is a highly competitive social market economy, which is such an expression that refers to a dual approach, that on the one hand, the EU would like to be a competitive market as much as possible, but on the other hand, it also aims to take into consideration social aspects like well-being of citizens, access to public services, and other public interests, and so on. So this is these two pillars, which are very important in defining the status of state-owned enterprises as well. And of course, the internal market definition, which is an area without frontier, and the above mentioned mission, sometimes they are conflicting approach. They can be conflicting approach. On the basis of this fundamental, we can find the most important rules and principles that defines the status of state-owned enterprises in the EU internal market. this may be the one most important principle, the principle of neutrality, which says that the treaties, the main treaties of the European Union, shall in no way prejudice the rules in member states governing the system of property ownership. So it means that, as a main rule, the very existence of state-owned companies is not against the spirit of the EU market rules. So only the government share in the company is not against the internal market. But it is also a rule that these entities are seen as competitive actors in the EU internal market, which means that they must behave as such. So they must behave, they are expected to behave as all the other companies in the competitive market, with certain exceptions, because they're very often they have such functions which may justify the exemptions. But the main rule is that they must be as any other companies in the EU internal market. And here you can see very important article also from the main EU treaties, which governs the status of state-owned enterprises. It is also very interesting that the primary role of the European Union, these treaties, don't use the expression state-owned enterprises. So they use public undertaking, they use state revenue monopolies, or they refer to these companies as undertaking entrusted with the operation of services of general interest, but they don't use, which is interesting that, however, when the European Union concludes an international agreement with non-EU country, in this case, in these trade agreements, we often can see an article included which has the subtitle as state-owned enterprises. And the content of such articles often like this here that you can see, this article from the EU treaty. You can see here simply that as a main rule, public undertakings and undertakings to which member states grant special or exclusive rights, member state shall neither enact nor maintain in force any measure which is contrary to the EU internal market and competition rules. But you can also see that there is another section, undertakings entrusted with the operation of services of general economic interest or having the character of revenue producing monopoly shall have been subject to rules contained in the treaties, insofar as the application of such rule doesn't obstruct the performance in law or in fact of the particular task assigned to them. Very simply, this means this a bit complicated formulated article that there are undertakings on the internal market in the European Union which perform some public service mission like energy supply, water supply, waste management, and so on. And as a main rule, they are subject to the internal market and competition rules. But if needed for fulfilling their specific public service obligation, in these cases, they can be exempted to the from the application of the EU internal market and public service, internal market and competition rules. So this is the main idea. And what is important here, that despite the fact that state-owned enterprises are not explicitly mentioned here, in a large percentage of cases, publicly owned or partly publicly owned companies are those companies who are responsible for the performance of public service obligations. And there is also an important article which says that member states shall adjust any state monopolies of commercial character so as to ensure that no discrimination regarding the conditions under which goods are procured and marketed exist between nationals of member states. At first sight, it is against state monopolies, but we can also conclude that this article allows the very existence of state monopolies if they can operate in a non-discriminative way. So this is the article which lead us to the conclusion that tobacco monopolies, alcohol beverage monopolies, these can legitimately maintain in the EU internal market. And here you can see a figure about the development process on the basis of those rules that I mentioned before. You can see here that so these are the EU internal market and competition rules, which as a main rule must be applied also for the state-owned enterprises. But here you can also see the member states' strategic interests, public service obligations, like the before mentioned public services, or for example, regulation of gambling or tobacco producing, which may be conflicted with each other. And we can see as a development process changes in the regulation of public service provision in the broad sense and related exemptions at the level of the European Union. In the 1980s, 90s, and early 2000 years, we can see clearly that the liberalization aspect is promoted. It means, and these tendencies are clearly seen in the regulation at the level of the European Union, but also on the application of law by the European Commission as an administrative body in competition law cases, and in the case law of the European Court of Justice of the European Union, which is the judicial body of the European Union. We can see that in these early years, earlier decades, the liberalization aspect is promoted. Here, this is the tendency that such public service exemptions and government strategy interest exemption must be interpreted in a very restrictive way. And we can see a change from the middle of the 2000s that there is some kind of turn in which there is a priority is given to the public service and strategic interests, and there is a less restrictive approach to the liberalization interest. It means, for example, that in the Charter of European Union, which is a Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, there is also an article which says, as a right of the citizens, the right to access to public services. There are other amendment of the EU rules like this. In the sectoral liberalization, we can see that there are plus provisions regarding the rights of disabled persons, for example, access of disabled person to public services, and so on. So we can see such a tendency, and we can also see that it is on the one hand, this tendency is good because it takes into account in a broader perspective the interests other than liberalization. On the one hand, it is not always good, because when you it is possible that a state refers to the interest of I don't know, public service provision or public defense and so on, but in the background there is an abuse with the rules of EU internal market, which allows broader scope for the exemption regulation. And we can also, so it is not only one side, but rather a two-phase tendency. And we can also see that crisis, like the financial and economic crisis of 2008, and even the coronavirus crisis, these crises accelerated this process. So they rather contributed to the extension of exemptions and made many tensions between market interests and social public service interests. And I would like to show you an example for a conflict, the golden shares, that is so the golden share. I think it is such a solution which is applied in many jurisdictions. It is a type of share which gives its shareholders special voting rights, giving its holder the ability to block another shareholder from taking more than ratio of ordinary shares. So it means that only a share with a symbolic value can have such a preferential right, which is a veto against the other shares represented by other owners. And the golden shares can be issued by public companies or governments. In the EU, we can see that they were popular during the early 80s, when the British government started to privatize companies like energy supply, transportation, and this was an instrument to control, to maintain the control over them. And governments in other parts of Western Europe also followed this example. And in particular, it was followed by the Central and Eastern European countries after the change of regime in 1989-19, and starting the development to market economy. Therefore, it is a question now, because according to the European Court of Justice, such kind of golden shares are against the internal market rules, in particular the freedom of establishment of companies and the free movement of capitals, because they have an effect of excluding from the market of other private investors, and therefore they can be maintained only under very strict specific conditions. Therefore, it is a very interesting question that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, that the preference voting share, which is which is held by the MOL company of the Hungarian government, whether it is in line with the European Union rules or not. So it is a question. So if we summarize these rules of the European Union, we can see that these are not standard or specific detailed rules regarding the status and the governance of state-owned enterprises, rather framework rules which govern the operation of them in the internal market. And there is an exemption that I can mention, the directive on transparency of financial relations between public authorities and public undertakings. This directive says that the EU countries are required to ensure the transparency of any public funds which are made available to state-owned enterprises. On the other hand, it is also important to mention that there are exemptions from this directive. So, for example, state-owned companies involving the supply of services and are unlikely to have a significant impact on the trade between the EU countries, they can be excluded from the directive, or the central banks can also be excluded from the scope of the directive. So it is also such a requirement which is not applicable for all the state-owned enterprises in the European Union. Which is important to mention here that as other international standards, so the main standards are can be found in the OECD guidelines on corporate governance of state-owned enterprises. These are guidelines, as the name shows, which means that not binding rule, but these are other advices for state-owned enterprises that how to be effective, more effective, how to be more socially responsible, so these are rather general guidelines. But we can see that and these also have some transparency issue, and we can also see that despite the fact that these are only soft law, so guidelines, and these are not part of the European Union legislation. The European Union, in particular the European Commission, try to follow these guidelines and try to in certain area of regulation enforce these guidelines from the respect of these guidelines from the countries of the European Union. So, for example, Bulgaria would like to join the Eurozone, and one of the conditions which is required to fulfill from Bulgaria is the compliance with the OECD guidelines on corporate governance on state-owned enterprises. So we can also see that these guidelines are in important respects of the development of the European Union, uses by the European Commission as conditions for certain member states. And finally, I would like to discuss these state-owned enterprises in times of crisis. We can see, compared to the financial and economic crisis in 2008, not only the banking sector and the financial sector were concerned by that, but almost all economic sectors. So it is very important also when we would like to assess the role of state-owned enterprises and the impact of the crisis on the situation of state-owned enterprises. We can see that across the world, the pandemic induced global recession has forced countries to rescue their state-owned enterprises through measures such as debt restructuring and debt relief. And it is very important to highlight the extension of scope and relaxing the conditions of granting state subsidies in the EU and all over the world. So we can see that exceptional rules, which are rather state intervention against following the normal market rules, have been extended And the European Union also made many exemptional rules or guidelines, for example, relaxing the conditions of granting state aid for particular sectors or particular enterprises, relaxing the rules of public procurement. So we can see, I would say, an authorization for a broader market intervention. And such an authorization is one of the reasons why the state-owned enterprises gained greater significance in the European Union, and they were either supported by stated granted by the governments, or we can see nationalization process that previously private companies have been nationalized by a state and became to state-owned enterprise. And the question is that whether these state-owned enterprises supported with this direct market intervention help support these distressed economies, or they drain on precious public resources that can be better used elsewhere. So this is a very important question, which is formulated by the public discussions about the status of state-owned enterprises. You can see this is just a picture about the air transport industry. You can see the type of the measures that were granted in the form of state aid to the European state-owned enterprises which are active in the air transport industry. And the European Commission also monitored these measures, and all these measures that you can see in the table have been declared as legal measures, which is not against the state aid rules of the European Union. And we can also see that the state-owned enterprises are directly or indirectly involved in fight against the COVID. So this is also an approach from the European Union country that, okay, they support them, but they also entrust them with special tasks. So, for example, producing masks is not a public service in normal time, but it is a specific public service in crisis time. So, for example, companies like the Boeing and Airbus take this medical supply to this medical supply function. Or example from other European countries, but outside the European Union, there were governments that are providing utility bill waivers to vulnerable population. As far as I can, as far as I know, Indonesia also adopted a measure regarding maybe in the electricity sector to help the population in this respect. And public transportation companies were also responsible to operate public transportation, not only in Europe, but all over the world, even with a significant loss in revenue. And we can also see, for example, in Hungary, in Budapest, the main transport company in Budapest is also a publicly owned company by the local government of Budapest, the municipal government of Budapest, but it is not, it doesn't, didn't receive any extra state aid. Even the amount of state aid to this company is in a decreasing line over the recent years, and it almost went to bankrupt. but it does still does operating with a quite well transportation network. We can also see further examples that, so for example, in Slovenia, the process of privatization in the tourism sector slowed down. So it was an attempt to privatize the tourist sector, but it is rather an opposite process due to the pandemic situation. And what is interesting that all over the world we can see that foreign direct investment by state-owned enterprises has grown rapidly over the last years. And this COVID situation accelerated this process. Why? Because this relaxing of subsidy or otherwise state-owned state aid rules can be observed in all over the world, not only in Hungary, not only in the European Union. What does it mean? That it is easy, much easier for those state-owned enterprises who are not from Europe but would like to invest in Europe to get state aid from the home country to such an investment. And it is a quite growing conflict between the European Union approach and this foreign investor. And the European Commission already issued a white paper which represents an approach to foreign governments which subsidize these state-owned enterprises, that linking these to the application of the European state rule. So the Commission requested in this white paper the foreign governments, non-European governments, to grant state aid to this investor in line with the European state aid rules in order to not to distort the European market. So these are the example, and we can also see that there is that these COVID measures can also lead to even abuses with that kind of rules, exemption rules, but it might be subject to the discussion or other presentation. So thank you very much. I hope that it was not too long, and so I'm ready for answering your question and discussion. And you can also email me if you have any question. And I think I'm stopping sharing this, and I can see you now.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. As we can see, the complexity of the state-owned companies in European Union is maybe we need a couple times to digest the informations, because the state-owned enterprises regime is quite different from Indonesian model or management. So for the next session, I will open the question from the participant. Maybe some of you can raise hand or write your question on the chatting on the chat, please. One of the interesting point of your presentation is about the share. There is no minimum share in the state-owned companies in the European Union. For example, in Indonesia, the companies can be said or can be categorized as a state-owned companies if the government own the majority of the share, like more than 50% or even more than 70%. So if the government own less than 50%, for example, the companies cannot be categorized as a state-owned enterprise. So in Indonesia, we have a minimum share. So how the European countries categorize the state-owned based on what? Based on share or based on the ownership? How they categorize?
This is interesting question because I would say that the issue how they are regulated in the different European countries and how they are categorized is very, very different. For example, for example, we participated in a project which me and my colleagues, which analyzed the regulation on state-owned enterprises in almost all the European Union countries. And we have established that there is no regulation, and it is very, very different. So we can say that there are diverse company form, and like public limited company, maybe this is the most frequently used form for being a state-owned company, for creating a state-owned company. And we can see that it is very, very hard to define any categorization because the general expectation of the European Union is that to behave as normal private companies, and therefore therefore there is no, I would say, officially there is no, or very exceptionally, is any status, any recognized status for the state-owned company. So only that we can. So I would say rather that the approach is therefore different, because the approach is that, okay, in each of the company we can see that how many is the share, how strong can be decisive can be the influence of the government, but it is very very difficult to define some categorization. So I rather would say that there are certain companies which has some specific rights as well. For example, an exclusive right to do, I don't know, public transportation. So for example, there is the main railway company of the European main railway company of Hungary, the MÁV company, and it has an exclusive right in Hungary, an almost exclusive right, but a very special right to operate the railway transportation in the Hungarian railway network. But it is not a distinct category. It is rather refers to the special right of this company. So I think that the lack of such a categorization is rather can be derived from this expectation of the European Union that as far as possible, please behave like a normal private company. And what I can say there are, what is also interesting to note, it is not subject to that discussion, but it has a very close link, that there are certain public bodies, maybe in for example, Stadtwerke in Germany, which are public bodies, but certain function in the trade, in the commercial activities. So there are some very strange entities between the as public authorities in form, but with certain public company-like function, which can also be the participant in the market. So I would say that maybe they can be also separated as different categories. But otherwise, I would say that maybe the categorization can be the basis of the company form, whether it is a publicly limited company when only where it is not open for buying shares, but no, not easy to mention any other type of categorization.
It's very interesting. Please.
I can see some question in Indonesian language
No,
on the chat.
I tell to everyone if they have question, they can ask in Indonesian language, and I will translate for you. Okay. I see those ambassador from Bangladesh here, Mr. Sony. Could you please raise question to the professor?
Thank you, Mr. Asrul, for this nice opportunity. Actually, I don't have any question right now because I was enjoying the whole discussion. But this is out of my subject, so it was really difficult for me to catch all the point. So I don't have any question right now. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Another comment maybe or question from the audience on the state-owned enterprises from the EU perspective or from the Indonesian perspective. You can actually, we can compare the management model or even the share-own model. It's quite interesting, especially for Indonesian SOEs. I also see some of my friends here, my colleagues. I see Muhammad Al-Animat. Is there any question or comment from you?
Thank you, my colleague, about this opportunity and for all this organized. This I have a great day with all colleagues and my professor also. But this is interesting topic. I don't have a question. Just I have added thing if there any relation this to Professor Ildiko. I think you, Professor, you know my topic. I mean legal regulation of electronic banking. I think this topic all the time related with the central bank. We know central bank generally is public constitution. I mean it's follow all the regulation to government, because that the central bank all the time give a hard condition to license banking. You know, the banking is a private constitution, private company, because that I don't know there any relationship in this regard. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Yes, we can see. Yes, in the EU member states as well, that central banks, which are the part of the network of central banks if in the European Union, together with the European central banks, are in also public ownership. But we can also see a tendency that it connected not to the current or the recent coronavirus crisis, but it is rather connected to the 2008 financial and economic crisis, that the number of financial companies and banks, banking companies that previously have been privatized, then returned back to the state ownership. And after this crisis, many banking company have been owned by the state, at least partly by the state. And so we can see also such a trend, and in many countries this is also a strategic plan that okay, or that was a strategic plan that okay, after this financial crisis, let's return to the privatization of such bank. But this coronavirus pandemic slowed down this process as well. And regarding these types of let's back to the previous question. Just I forgot to mention that it is that the ownership percentage is that's why less a bit significance, because because there are many instruments as the state, the government can influence the decisions of the company. So it is also a possibility, and it is also quite often can be observed in the European Union, that there is, for example, a state-owned company with, I don't know, 10% share of the government, but the directors are nominated by the state, so such directors are nominated, which follow somehow the preferences of the state. So it is also a form of influencing this decision, and to govern the functioning of the company by the state, even with a marginal percent of ownership. And I will also, if I have, or if I can see, yes, I can see a question in the chat.
Yeah, it's from.
Shall I read out? Could you please read? Oh.
I will read for you, Professor. It's from Pima Rutia from Asia University in Taiwan. Okay, my question is: do the OECD guidelines also have rules about sustainability issue in SOE? Since the future business trend will be about the sustainable development goals, and what about a case in the European Union? Thank you, Ms. Pima, for the question. So it's about, is there any OECD guidelines on the sustainability issues, and is there also the EU legal instruments or law in the sustainability issues?
Yes, we can see also in the development of the OECD guidelines that this sustainability issue becomes more and more the part of the expectation which is formulated by the OECD against the state-owned enterprises. So we can also see this sustainability issue often appears in the guidelines or in the policy papers of the OECD, and this process, which is a positive process, has been accelerated by the crisis because the approach of the OECD and also the European Union and also the World Bank is that there must be strong requirement regarding not only the social responsibility by the efficiency and also the sustainability in regarding the operation of the state-owned enterprises. Now I'm in a project of examining strategic goals of state-owned enterprises. And for example, in the case of Slovenia, from the 10 largest state-owned enterprises, I have counted at least 8 enterprises where has the strategic goal the sustainable development. So now I'm currently with Slovenia and also Hungary. Hungary is less so sustainability friendly as regards the strategic goal, but I can see that it is a trend also in the other European state-owned enterprises, and so it is very much promoted by the international standard and requirements from the European Union as well. And it also can be seen in the sectors that there is a larger percentage of such sectors where state-owned enterprises are present, like renewable energy, electromobility. These are also sectors that themselves express this sustainability requirement.
Thank you, Professor.
Shall I have a question to you?
Okay.
That you mentioned that in Indonesia those enterprises are categorized as state-owned enterprises, which where the state have at least 51% of shares, and I would like just to ask you that what is the real consequence, for example, of this categorization for those enterprises, for example, where, I don't know, the company, the state has 30% shares, not more. So they are also owned by the state, but not having the status. And what is the consequence or the practical issue of that?
Based on my knowledge, maybe I'm wrong. The share from the government to the state-owned enterprises in Indonesia is a part of state budget. It's a part of state budget, and therefore the state-owned enterprise is not a fully private company. They also half private and half public company. And also the monitoring, the evaluation, and the audit, it's held by the state. And if there is a fraud in the state-owned state-owned company in Indonesia, it will be categorized as corruption. As the law applied is the law on the anti-corruption law, and if the state-owned enterprise cannot achieve the target from the state, like the revenue or any big losses, the board of director can be categorized as also some of corruption. So in Indonesian perspective, there are some problems, especially in the state and in the state enterprise, state-owned enterprise position, because they have money from the state, but they operate like a private company, and they also have like privilege, like many privilege, and even if they experience the big losses, the state will provide a bailout money for them, and the consequences, if the state own less than 50%, is technically it won't categorize as state-owned enterprise, but the 30% of share is will be audited by the State Supreme Auditorial Board. Yeah. So if there is a fraud, they will be categorized as corruption case. It's quite complicated because the transition from the fully public to the fully private company, it's depend on the political will of the government, and the government is still categorize the state-owned enterprise in Indonesia is not fully private company, but also have a public mission, also have a public public money. So I think the next question from the audience. Is there any question from you, or maybe Miss Rehulina, will you raise a question for us?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon for us, whether in Indonesia, in Hungary. Well, it's because this is my research topic is relating to human rights and business, and then I have this I have also this question which actually I have to answer by doing research, but maybe Miss Ildiko can help me to find the answer to this question. Is there any human rights regulation for the state-owned enterprise? I mean, is this enterprise is belong to the state, so is there a human right is automatically applied to this state-owned enterprise, or it's not?
I think it's also a very good question, and I again would like to thank you for all the questions so far. It was very useful also for me. Your as well, Rehulina. That I would say that, for example, from these OECD guidelines, you can derive some. I wouldn't say that these are directly human rights protection expectations, because these are not like directly human right protection related, but this main principle of social responsibility, which also concern the status of workers or the impact of the operation of the companies, for not only for the employees of the companies, but also, for example, for the service providers. I would say that in relation to this rather market-related human rights, we can derive these expectations from the principle of social responsibility, and we can also so I would say that these are derived human rights expectation that can not be enforced as you infringe some human rights if you do not comply with this requirement. But for example, these minimum standards, which are also human rights related, that can be connected to these companies' activity, can be then, for example, requested to comply when for example, the company is applying for a support, for a grant. For example, it can be a good occasion to enforce in this way this requirement. And for example, when we talking about public service provider companies, in this case, this social responsibility requirement can also include the access to public services under reasonable conditions, reasonable price. And for example, this access to public services is also like a human rights, which is included in the Charter of EU Fundamental Rights. So when you see broadly these human rights, I think in this case we can say yes, under the condition that I mentioned before.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the question. I think we have to end this discussion because it will escalate it more, and we have no time for this occasion. I would like to say thank you for Professor Ildiko Bartha for the public lecture. Also, I would like to thank you also for Faculty of Law UMM students. I hope you, some of you will continue your education in master degree or in the PhD degree in our university, in the University of Debrecen. If you have any question about postgraduate study in Debrecen, please send the question, raise the question to Ms. Rehulina, because Ms. Rehulina is our ambassador. Oh, I think we have one question, one more
Yes,
question,
a long
last
one.
question. It's quite long. Okay, it will be last question, very last question. I'm sorry, Mr. Arya. It's from Mardatul
Yes.
Ihsan. I want to ask about intercampus collaboration for my final project. Oh, okay. I am an engineering master student in Indonesia. I have problems in my thesis because I cannot do research because I work in Budapest now. This relates to the theme of our study today between Hungary and Indonesia on your campus. What are the regulation and process that must be followed? Can this really be done related to the theme of today's discussion about the approach of EU member countries with Indonesia. Technology, because I have passed all the courses, I just need to do my thesis research. Can you help with the solution, Professor? Thank you. Okay, it's not actually it's not really related to the public lecture, but it's like administration technical, yeah, in education. Maybe you can provide us some insight about this matter, Professor. Yeah, it's
Maybe we can I can send my email address as a reply to in the chat.
okay.
And maybe you can raise this question directly in an email to me, and maybe we can try to find a solution for your problem outside the framework of this lecture. One moment, please.
Okay.
And here you can see my email address.
Okay.
You can copy it and send this directly to via email to me.
Yeah. Please, Miss or Mr. Mardatul Ihsan, send an email to Professor Ildiko. She will answer the possible
But I can,
solution.
or I can recommend you something.
Recommend some person to solve your problem. I think it's better.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Also, I see Professor Matthias Bence here. Thank you for coming, Professor. And also my colleague from University of Debrecen. Thank you for join with us today. The next, I
also would like to thank you all.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. I just would like to thank you for all the questions and all the participants for discussing here this topic.
Okay. Thank you very much. And now, from now on, Mr. Arya will guide the event. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Asrul, and thank you very much for Dr. Tongat and Prof. Ildiko. It's just a great lecture. And then thank you very much for all of the attendance, both sides from Hungary and Indonesia. Now we arrive to the last agenda. If anyone is interested to reach each other for scientific events or joint research institutionally, we may discuss intensively soon. We have also here Rahulina. Rahulina is the ambassador in Debrecen, and we can try to reach the authorities together that have same vision and agenda, both from Hungary and Indonesia, regarding to the scientific events, joint publications, or joint research. And we would like to say farewell. And before we close this lecture, probably we please to the Dr. Tongat and Prof. Bartha Ildiko to give closing statement, probably if you have. Dr. Tongat, if you're still here, you can give the closing statement. Yeah. The Dean, yeah, maybe Professor Ildiko can give the closing statement for us. Yeah. Yes, time is yours. Yeah,
Mine.
Yeah, closing statement.
Okay. Yeah. So okay for me. So thank you very much for this opportunity to take part. I really enjoyed discussing this topic with me. I'm also very grateful for the questions and comments. I also sent my email address to everyone to the chat. So if you have further questions and comments, please feel free to contact me. So thank you very much again for the opportunity, also for all of for you, Mr. Tongat, and also for Asrul for the very nice guidance me in that public venture. So thank you very much for all colleagues.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
thank you,
Professor
Professor.
Ildiko. Thank you, everyone, and
Thank
the
you.
class will be happy to collaborate. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Ari.
See
Ayuda.
you. Siastok.
See you. Bye.
Yes, talk.
Bye.
Islat.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.